course, I'm delighted to welcome also the ECUSA representatives. So, Cristina, just please do the honors. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks everyone for coming this cold night. And it's a challenge to move around Boston. My name is Cristina Vázquez. I'm the president of ECUSA Boston. As many of you know already, ECUSA stands for Spanish Scientists in the US, but in this association we welcome not only scientists, but also engineers, people working in technology, teachers, people working in administration, or anyone who is interested in any of these fields. I'm going to talk a little bit about our objectives so that you can get to know us better. Our first goal is to establish a network of Spanish scientists and technologists and the rest of the people I just talked about, to bring all of you together so that you can create collaborations and get to know each other. We also want to increase the social awareness of science and technology developed by Spaniards. And our last goal is to serve as a point of contact for Spanish and American institutions as well as for the media. To fulfill all these goals, we have a program where we will have some seminars about professional development, like the one we are holding here tonight with Rafael, and we will have more coming. We will have talk with the Spanish professionals working on science and technology. They will show us their job. We will also have some events to promote the networking between all of you. We are just starting with a program in education, and I don't know, Rebecca is outside. You can talk to her if you're interested in this program that I'm going to talk about. So here, what we want to do basically is to find volunteers between our community who are willing to spare their time and go to the schools only for a couple of hours to talk about their work related to science and technology and do some activities with the kids. So I really encourage you to join this activity because it's going to be really fun and really rewarding.
Is it in English or in Spanish?
We are talking with a bilingual high school right now in the Boston area, close to downtown, so it's very convenient. So I think it's up to you if you want to do it in Spanish or in English. I think the idea is to do it in Spanish, but it's going to depend on the level of Spanish in the kids of the class. But we can talk about the details if someone is interested. And finally, we have, last but not least, we have the International Mentor Program, and we have some representatives here like Rafael, if you want to know more details about this program. So what we do here is we have some mentors that are currently working here in the US. They are professionals working in science and technology, and they will be mentors for mentees that are in Spain. And they are students, graduate and undergraduate students. They communicate with each other via Skype. And this is a very successful program, very interesting. If someone wants to join for the next semester, please talk to Rafael, and she will be more than happy to talk about the details. So this is our website if you want to know more about us, and our contact is boston@ecusa.es. I also encourage you to follow us on the social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. This is our next event with Lauren Solano. Here, Lauren is going to talk about how to do an efficient networking, because as you know, doing networking in this country is extremely important. So we're going to learn a lot of tricks from her, how to do an elevator pitch, how to stand out in a conversation, and so on and so forth. So I really recommend this seminar. And it will be on March 16th at the CIC, Cambridge Innovation Center, at Kendall Square. We will send you a link with the invitation so that you can register up front. And this is tonight's workshop with Dr. Rafael Luna. I think we met a couple of years ago in a networking event. As you can say, it brings you somewhere.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend his seminars. I have learned a lot from him. It's really, really useful. Hopefully it will change you after tonight. So let me talk a little bit about Rafael Luna. He is the CEO of Luna Scientific Storytelling, and he also has a book called The Art of Scientific Storytelling. I think you're going to show a picture of the book and give some information if someone is interested. And at the same time, he's an instructor at Harvard Medical School at the Department of Biological Chemistry and Molecular Pharmacology. And he's been very successful with this company. He has given some seminars, not only in US, but also in Europe. And I hope you all enjoy tonight's seminar and learn a lot about it. Thank you, Rafael, for coming. And thank you, of course, to the Institute of Cervantes for donating this fantastic room and for holding the reception afterwards.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Cervantes, for hosting me. And I'm really excited to talk about something I'm very passionate about, and it's the art of scientific storytelling. So let's go ahead and get started. So I think I asked a few people earlier if people have heard of scientific storytelling. And what we're doing is we're just adopting two different methods. There's the scientific method, and then there's the storytelling narrative method. And sometimes there's been a chasm between the sciences and the humanities for a while. But now it's getting so important to be able to communicate. Then how do scientists take advantage of the humanists, how they communicate effectively? And how can humanists incorporate some of the logical methods that the scientists use to really tell stronger stories as well, and incorporate rigor, the scientific rigor into their humanities. So it's just a fluid flow of exchange. And this is something that I've been passionate about. I love humanities. I love sciences. I have two loves, and you really can only love one thing. So I just try to operate in between and just have the scientific storytelling, so I can get the best of both worlds. So we'll talk about the genesis of scientific storytelling, hypotheses that pack a punch, drafting a storyline, and neatly tying results into a story. Now, every time I give this workshop, it's never going to be the same. It's always going to be a little different because it's different based off the audience. So hopefully no one's shy here. And so there's no need to raise hands. If you have questions or some aspects, or ask a question, then just go ahead and blurt out an answer, and we'll just keep moving things along. So you get to dictate the pace. We can either go really fast, or we can, hover around certain areas that are important for you. So you get to decide. So what is storytelling? Yeah. So what does storytelling mean to you? Everyone, we probably have about 40 people in the room, so we should have about 40 different answers. What does storytelling mean to you? There's no reason to be shy. Anyone have kids here? Is storytelling important for them? Why is that? Like, what do you think? Why do you think it's important for them? It's a way to learn. Okay. And yes, do you have kids as well, you said? So why do you think they like Disney movies? No, your kids.
I think so.
Yeah, most kids do that. I actually love Disney movies as an adult as well. Yes?
Way to spark the imagination.
Spark the imagination. Okay. Now, do we need storytelling in the professional world? Because a lot of Disney, we watch that, but then we go into the professional world, we have to give a seminar. And how many people in the professional world, you go to a seminar and it's 45 minutes, and I don't know about you, sometimes for me it's torture. So I'm sitting there for 45 minutes, there's data after data, slide after slide, and it's very difficult to sit there, and I'm thinking about what else I could do with my time. I should be doing something else. But do we need this in the professional world, storytelling? Yeah, I think probably so. Probably so. So what is my story? So how did I get to stand here today? So my story is that I started off I wanted to major in English and history, actually. We have a history professor here. I wanted to major in history as an undergrad, but I go to college in Louisiana and they say, well, if you want a scholarship, I said, what are the scholarships in history or the humanities? And at that time, they said, well, we don't have any scholarships to give out that easy. You're supposed to bring it with you to the university. I said, well, does the university provide any scholarships? And they were like, yeah, in sciences. So you have to be in chemistry or biology. But I didn't know any chemistry or biology. So if I wanted to get a college education, then I needed to major in chemistry and biology. And so I majored in the sciences and had a really hard time understanding the sciences because I loved humanities, I loved stories. My dad had a video store we watched. He had 4,000 movies. We started off with 10 movies, we watched all those. Then we got to 3,500 movies, to 4,000 movies, and we watched all those as well. And so my whole childhood development, adolescent development was framed with movies. And so I get to college, and of course I want to do more of that, but I didn't have a scholarship. So go to science, and of course started flunking out all my science courses until I get to biology. And I was about to flunk that test too, and flunked calculus, English, and chemistry, and then I was just stuck with biology. And then it's like, wow, maybe college is not for me, but let me just keep trying this biology. And I got to the Krebs cycle, it's an energy cycle, and it happens in the mitochondria of every single cell, most of the cells in your body, and it produces energy. And I just couldn't understand it. So then I said, well, let me just put this into a story. And I put it into a story, and I looked at all the rest of the pictures in the biology book and put everything into the story. Now I go take my test, and I've already flunked all my other tests for my freshman year, and thinking that maybe I need to leave college. And the teacher comes in at Southern University in Baton Rouge, and he takes all the tests and throws it on the desk and says, this is the worst class we've ever had in 25 years. And I'm sitting there feeling terrible. And he says, only one person did well, and that's Mr. Rafael E. And I ended up getting an 88 on the test. And I was thinking, I said, but I didn't even finish reading all the chapters. And I just looked at the pictures and put stories. And then I went from the 88 to 92, 94, 96. Before you know, I started getting the highest scores in all the freshmen of, I think 2,000 freshmen. Before you know, I started getting high scores in all my classes. I started putting storytelling in all of my chemistry, biology, English, you name it, I put it in there. And got to Harvard and started doing some of that. And I'll finish the rest of the story when we get there a little bit later. But this is how I'm here today. So I'm in love with science, and I'm in love with narrative, and I'm so lucky to be able to do what I really love, research and storytelling. So now when you present your work in an oral format, is that nerve-wracking at times? Yeah, it took me a while to get used to doing public speaking as well. It's really kind of nerve-wracking. But is it a way to make it fun? So, just to mention my book, this is my book here, and this is a picture of me and JP Licks just hanging out. And when I gave my first workshop in Norway, they said, the professors, they were like, well, where's your book? Because when you leave back to America, we need to be able to keep doing this scientific storytelling method. And I was like, well, what book? She's like, well, you need a book. So on the flight back, I was writing my book. It took me a year and a half and published in 2013. And it's available on Amazon, on the Kindle or hard copy, whichever you prefer. And so it's all over the world. So even in Spain, Amazon Spain. So you can tell your friends there. So the game has changed. And now we work in the global workforce. I travel to Europe. I travel all over the US. I'm going to Beijing next month. And so it's a global workforce. And everyone's going for this competitive edge. And because everyone is so good now, so talented, how can you make yourself a little bit better, or at least stand out so that people can remember you? And one way to do that is to be reinvented as a storyteller. So when you're at your grandmother's house, this is the best playground for storytelling. So when you go to your grandmother's house and she says, what is it that you do? And we're all in science, technology, history, we use complicated pieces, statistics, economics. What would you tell your grandmother? Would you give her all the details? Or what would you normally say? So here's some typical answers we get from people that work at Harvard Med. And unless your grandmother is a chemist or a biophysicist or an engineer, she may or may not get this. But there's no reason why your grandmother couldn't understand some of the work you do if you can frame it in a certain narrative. or even if you want to explain things to your children, your family. And so this is a great time to tell a story, and in 60 seconds or less. So it has, I think it was the 7th grade, we learned about the literary dramatic arc. Does anyone remember this? With the, you set the scene in the beginning, you have increasing tension, you have a climax, the highest point of your story, the following action, the denouement, and your conclusion. Now, are there any chemists in the room that understand, that can recognize this curve underneath the, anyone? What is it?
Yeah, because it's activation energy.
Yes, energy of activation curve. Very smart group. Yes, yes. So it's the energy of activation curve. So when I had a typical dramatic arc that the humanists use and I presented to the scientists, I had a hard time explaining it to them. But once I fit this to an energy of activation curve, the scientists just fell in love with this, and they really started thinking of it a different way. Because I think we speak 2 different languages. And so if you're doing something that's scientific, whether even if it's in the humanities and something that's academic, they will still start off with the introduction. What are the results you have? The most important results you will put later, and you build here is character development, and then you have your validation and your discussion at the end. So now we get to work. So what is a story? We talked about storytelling, but what is a story? So we'll need to define the terms of what we'll be discussing today. Anyone? If we had to reduce our story to the lowest common denominator in 2 words, what's the story?
Beginning and
Beginning and end. Okay, that's very good. I haven't heard that one before. That's a good one. Okay. And that's going to be part of the talk. Yes, we'll do have the beginning and end. But what must you have in the story? Conflict. And if you have conflict, what else would you have? Resolution. Yes, you'll have the conflict resolution. And so it also tells a series of events in a logical fashion. And this is the key, the logic. It's the logical fashion. And you surround events around a main character. And the protagonist is irrevocably changed. And this is the same if you're doing a science, discussing science experiments as well. So now, the scientific part, the scientific storytelling, the art of scientific storytelling. So if a story is nothing but conflict resolution, then what is a hypothesis to deal with the scientific part? In 5th grade, they taught me this, and I teach this to my daughter. She's in the 6th grade, but we've been talking about this since she was in the 4th grade. I think she's heard enough of this hypothesis stuff. So, so what's a hypothesis in 2 words? What 3? An idea.
falsifiable statement.
A falsifiable statement. Validation. Conjecture. It's just basically like an educated guess, right? It's an educated guess. So, and all those what you said they were actually correct. So, but basically just an educated guess because we don't really know. We hypothesize and we're going to test this. So I'm going to test this. And so this whole scientific storytelling was built by, we had scientific research, and we set that equal to a scientific story. So hypothesis validation, we set that equal to conflict resolution. And then this is the beauty of the scientific storytelling method. So now, when you do your science, whether you're writing a research paper or you're doing research design, you're designing your experiments and what to do next in the lab to do research, or you're doing a clinical study, and you have a hypothesis that needs to be validated, then now you can bring in all the elements of narrative craft into studying your hypothesis. But the same is true the other way as well. You can, if you're writing something in the humanities, you can bring in a lot of elements of the hypothesis and the development of that to really drive home your message and to make it more memorable. So, hypotheses that pack a punch. So, when we start, so today what we're going to do is we're going to do an elevator pitch, and we'll write something about ourselves, and it's going to be private. So feel free to write as much as you want, and we'll leave some time at the end so you can share if you like in front of others. That's always fun. But say you had to present your research or whatever work that you do in a story. How would you even start that? Or you're working on a manuscript, or you're working on a thesis paper, or you're working on a proposal, how would you even start? Especially when you're staring at the blank screen. Has anyone ever stared at that blank screen? It used to terrorize me. It used to terrorize me. And I would cry days, weeks, months when I was trying to do my dissertation. I was just stuck with this computer screen. How do you get started? Anyone? What are your methods? What do you normally do?
Think about the bigger picture and the problem that you're trying to address.
Oh, good. So think about the problem, yes.
I just put a lot of random stuff and then start writing out.
Random stuff and it starts adding up. Yes, very good. Anyone else?
Macro.
Background, right? Some people do backgrounds. And there's all different ways to address this. So the method I'm talking about today, and that's in the book, we talk about the hypothesis, which is starting with the title. And you start with, what's your hypothesis? And it's just, but we're putting a storytelling hypothesis. And we'll get into that a little bit later. And then from that storytelling hypothesis, we dilate that into a crafted storyline, we arrange the data, and the data is the most important thing to change. If you want to convince someone, you should have data. We were just having a conversation about statistics and using this method. Data is the strongest thing that we have to really for convincing. It's not how well the story is, it's really how well that data fits into that story. And then at the end, we'll just tie the story together. Because the data by itself, if it isn't presented packaged correctly, then it's not as memorable as well. So how do we compose a hypothesis? Anyone? Yeah, so we have the blank screen and we say we're gonna start with the hypothesis. Okay. And so typically it's, you can think of it maybe not just a hypothesis, but like a conclusion. What is the goal? What is it that's going to be at the end? And make it into an active statement. Then now we can find ways to discredit that and say, okay, is this true? If this must be true, we have different things to really validate or to substantiate the hypothesis. So what we normally do now, when I teach this this course, I teach the course at Harvard Med on scientific storytelling. We teach all our biomedical graduate students this method for doing their research manuscripts. It's a lot of fun. And so if you want to do a hypothesis, we make sure that every single hypothesis has a protagonist, an antagonist, conflict, scene, resolution, and stakes. Now, just to do a little review, protagonist is what? Protagonista. I should be careful practicing my Spanish around here. I'm not that good. But protagonista. What was the protagonista?
Main
The main character. Yes, the main character. The antagonist.
foil.
The foil, or it's something else, right? Just it's something. But not the main character. And and regarding scientific storytelling, will be all the other characters. All the other characters. So you have your main character and all the other characters. Conflict. That's apparent. The scene. It's where everything's taking place, and the resolution. And what about stakes? What are stakes in the story? Application, the impact, yes. The application and the impact, yes. So, so when I give these courses, I do it to nonprofits, to scientists, chemists, physicists, and so we all have different backgrounds. So what I did was I selected a topic that, well, maybe the majority have seen. If you haven't seen it, The Lion King, then we'll use it as a template, and then we'll unpack the logical elements of The Lion King, and then we'll apply that to our own narratives. So whenever you're thinking about, I'll play this trailer, and it's only shown for educational purposes and commentary only, not for entertainment. But think about your research. Okay, so now we go back. So now when we're talking about Simba, we're using this as a proxy, but for your own work and your own research. So we're going to discuss all these elements, but I really want you to think about yours because it'll really accelerate how you fill out your own elevator pitch. So who's the protagonist? Simba. The major antagonist? Scar. Yeah, Scar. And remember, all the other characters we're going to consider as antagonists, just to set everything in control. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And what's the conflict?
Succession.
I think I have this thing on still. Okay. So some great background music here. So this is really nice. Okay, so the conflict is over what? Power, in particular.
Succession.
Succession of what? The kingship. Yes, the kingship. And the scene is where? New Jersey? Texas? Africa, right? And there are clues, right? There are clues. And I used to give these workshops, and do they say TIA, this is Africa? And then, of course, at Harvard Medical School, I was doing my first course there. And it's like, yeah, they do say TIA. One of the birds say, this is Africa. And so, but typically when you're developing your story, you don't really want to load everything in there because you let the context. We know it's Africa based off the context, not because of the bird that the bird mentions it. We already knew that in the beginning. And the what's the resolution? We have the conflict of the kingship. So what's the resolution? Yeah, he becomes king. He defeats Scar. And what are the stakes? What's at stake?
The well-being of the community.
The well-being of the community, and how do we say that in they mentioned
The circle of life.
The circle of life, yes. So now, if you're gonna bring in, Christina mentioned about working with high school students. Say that we had high school students here, and we wanted to teach them the beauty of science, or just the beauty of the humanities, and the logical components that go into the work for humanities or for the sciences, and we have to do like a research poster. And in that research poster, we'll need a title. And it won't be The Lion King, but it'll be a scientific storytelling hypothesis. And it'll include all 6 of these elements. And so now we have them. So let's string them together. Someone mentioned they start throwing a whole bunch of things, random things at the computer screen. So we'll type in the protagonist, antagonist, conflict scene. We'll type those in. Now let's mesh them together and come up with a sentence. And yeah, feel free to let me know when you get there. So anyone? So we have protagonist. How can we string this all into one sentence? And the key is if we can put the resolution into a verb, an action verb. No linking verbs. The hypothesis should be bold and very strong. So we'll put this into an action verb. So let's start off. Most of the times I would recommend starting off with the protagonist. So we'll say Simba. Then we'll put in the resolution. Defeats, yes. Simba defeats Scar.
Kingdom.
Takes his rightful place as king in the pride lands of Africa, and restores the circle of life. Yes, very good. Maintains the circle of life. Very good. So this is what I do for every manuscript I ever publish, every research talk I ever give. You know, every time I consult with people, this is how we do it. We do the protagonist, antagonist, conflict, scene, resolution, and stakes. So now I'm telling you that, hey, this is a great method. This is something I've worked on, but this is something that I remember telling you that I started incorporating narrative in all of my classes and my coursework. But when I get to Harvard Medical School, I said, oh, it's going to be really tough here, and let me try the traditional way of learning and just more experimentation, complicated, sophisticated writing of my manuscript. And I sent my manuscript to be published in the journal Cell, and it was rejected. And it kind of took me back almost all the way back to that freshman year at college where I had trouble with that mitochondria and that I couldn't learn that the Krebs cycle. And so I say, well, did I finally hit the wall? Did I finally hit the wall where maybe I was just lucky all these last 17 years? And so maybe I'm not cut out for research. So my paper was rejected. We had 5 professors, 22 total co-authors, and we just could not agree. We had chemists, biochemists, physicists, and biologists, and two different types of yeast biologists, and we could not come up with the same language. And so the paper was rejected. So then I started taking creative writing courses because I was like, well, let me return to what I love, the humanities, and they tore my paper apart. So they, when I submitted my short story to my course here at Harvard Extension School, they, my classmates said, well, where's your thesis? You didn't, the climax you didn't reach wasn't logical. There was no character development. And then what happened after the resolution wasn't prepared. And these all seem like some of the comments that the professors that I was working with in drafting this manuscript, we had the same problems. So then I went to my professor who's just been inducted to the National Academy of Sciences, and can I incorporate my some narrative elements into our manuscript, into our research? He's like, sure, it's rejected, you can do whatever you want, but we just can't go back to doing the same way and fighting with everyone and arguing over every single word. So then I incorporated it, and I thought there was going to be a huge battle with all my collaborators. Like it was 2.5 years to write before we initially submitted. And then once they saw the new version, they loved it, and we all agreed for the first time in our whole collaboration, working together for like about five years at this point. And we got it published in some reports, and then we published our manuscript. And this was the beginning of scientific storytelling for me. So can anyone identify the protagonist here? So one of the useful things of this method is that I'm a biochemist and a microbiologist, but I work with people that are economists, economists, political scientists, mathematicians, and chemists and physicists, material science and engineers. And so a lot of times I don't know their work, but if we could just distill it down to the core elements, this is a quick way, if you're in technology and there's exposed to a whole new technology, this is a quick way for you to learn. And so so you wouldn't have the same problem like I had with my Krebs cycle. So where would be the protagonist here? The C-terminal domain of EI5, yes. So let's scratch all that out. All right, and now, so that's the protagonist. What about the antagonist? Yeah, EF1 and EF2 beta. Here we have 2 antagonists, right? Okay. And then, so let's scratch that out. So we have protagonist here, the first line, and then we have the antagonist here. So protagonist, antagonist, conflict. What's the conflict? Is it? It's the conflict. So in the Lion King was the kingship, right? Yes. The dynamic interplay. And the dynamic interplay is the conflict here. So we scratch that. So protagonist, antagonist, conflict. Scene. So what's the scene? We're running out of words now. Right. Yes, in the eukaryote, but more specifically, the scene. This is coded probably more for biochemists in this part. Start codon recognition. These 3 words here took another 2 years of research just to put these words in there. We were doing our work in test tubes, but we had to actually do an in vitro biochemistry assay and do this work in yeast and living yeast to be able to put these 3 words here. And this lets all the biochemical community know that it happens on the ribosome. So you have DNA, RNA, and protein. And for the RNA to be converted to a protein, the RNA comes on to like an anthropomorphic ribosome with the head, neck, and shoulder. And this mRNA comes like a scarf and lifts and the head gets open and has to recognize the right part. And at the right part, that AUG, the right signal, it shuts down, and then you start having protein synthesis. And so start codon recognition lets all the biochemists know that it's on the neck region, in this decoding region of the ribosome. Not on the back, not on the head, not on the shoulder, not on the legs, because we have proteins interaction on those. as well. But this lets the biochemists know exactly where this is. And the states, what are the states? So we're going from DNA, RNA to protein, from the RNA to protein. So what's our states? What's our circle of life? It's start codon recognition. So this is why we waited 2 years to get that data, because in all of your cells happening in your body, we have the mRNA being converted to protein for all useful functions of your body and structure, and it needs to happen start codon. So if you can't get that mRNA to be converted into protein, then life for humans will stop existing. So it's really important for us. That's the way we look at it. And so, okay, we did that one. We'll do a couple more very quickly. So the protagonist here. And it doesn't matter if you're a scientist or not, because we do it on, they work either way. Yes, who said that? Yes. Here we have two protagonists, EIF1A and EIF5. Yeah, did anyone know any stories where you have two protagonists? Yes, Hansel and Gretel is the classic one. And so there are some advantages of having two protagonists, and there could also be some disadvantages. What would be, so what's the difference between having one protagonist versus two? Because in some of your stories, you might have two protagonists. You might be working in a team, or you might be so what would be the advantage or disadvantage of having one protagonist versus two?
Two, you got more of a story to tell.
Two, you have more of a story. Maybe they could do something greater, right, together. But what about, okay, that would be an advantage. What about a disadvantage? Yes.
I'm not sure how this relates to science, but in literature, it's hard to give the two distinct voices sometimes.
Yeah, it's really hard to go into the minds of each of the protagonists, and you can do maybe to a tangential level, but to really develop a story. If you're doing research mechanism, you're doing a software development. If you can put your story into one protagonist, it makes things a lot easier. But here, it's very interesting. We didn't have a lot of data on each one individually. We only had them together. And so we couldn't delve in there. And so this paper was published in a paper that wasn't as high impact as our cell reports paper, but we still wanted to publish the work anyways. So very good point. So there's the advantage of that you can do more things, but then the disadvantage, you really can't get into the nitty gritty or more in depth with each protagonist. It takes time and it has to develop. All right, so we have eukaryotic initiation 1A and 5 is your protagonist. Let's delete that. Now, what about the antagonist? Yeah, EIF1, yes. Okay, EIF1 is the antagonist here. So we delete all those. So we have protagonist, antagonist. What about the resolution? All my hypotheses are action verbs. So our resolution here would be what? Retains, yes, an action verb. We get rid of all the linking verbs and passive voice, very active voice. And because research in your work is very active. You go to work every day, it's active, it's not passive. We really try to make a difference in our community and in our professional work as well. So we have protagonist, antagonist, resolution, conflict. Interaction, yes, it's interaction. Interactions are conflict that this conflict interacts with, yes, the interaction between these conflicts is, that's our conflict. And then what about our scene mistakes? We don't have start codon recognition this time, but this time we have scanning preinitiation complex. So before the mRNA gets to the right part, the mRNA is scanning. It's scanning on the ribosome. It's coming to the right part. And while the mRNA is moving, there are a whole bunch of proteins jumping on and off while this mRNA is moving on this anthropomorphic ribosome. And that's a scanning pre-initiation complex before the head shuts down. So while the head's open, it's moving. And that's very important for us because then also that's our scene that lets us know where it's happening and how it's happening. And for the biochemists, it's also stakes. So,
I have
yes.
a question.
Yes.
I understand the importance of including all these elements in the title, but aren't you concerned about the fact that the title is too long?
Yes, that's also a concern about the title's too long. And so what we do is we start off with our title, and then we try to find ways to reduce the word count and efficiency. So that's why I would have Preinitiation Complexes and scanning. I try to combine, can I bring scene and stakes into one word or to a triplet here? Or if I could find ways to do things more efficiently. And sometimes they're more successful, other times not. But what I do like is that if you have all 6 of these elements and you're pitching it, because now if I meet someone at a conference and I want them to read my paper, and I meet them in the elevator, and it says, oh, elevator pitch is typically how long? 90 seconds. 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 90 seconds. But in reality, how much time will someone give you? 10, right? If you get to that 10, right? But if you read this, it's the C-terminal domain of eukaryotic initiation factor 5, promotes start codon recognition by its dynamic interplay with EIF1 and EIF2 beta. You can either say within 7 to 10 seconds. And so now you have a miniature version of your elevator pitch. And then the purpose of elevator pitch is just to do what? To get them to say or to ask, tell me more, right? Yes. And so yes, I am a little worried about it, but if I can squeeze in an element, the scene, the stakes, that really ties everything together into one story, then yes, I wouldn't worry about as long as if you're publishing in a manuscript, they do have a character count and how far you can go, and then we fit those into the character counts. But I would typically not try to go 3 lines. This is pretty long, but in science it's hard to do sometimes. But I would try to get that whole story. And I had a question in the back.
This would be a whole other workshop, but if you're thinking about STEM education and you were going into a classroom of 5th graders, how would you tell that story to 5th graders? Or to the parents of 5th graders?
How to tell this research? Absolutely. Thank you. We will get to that part. I have copies of my elevator pitch, and you'll get to see it. And I can even play my YouTube video of the elevator pitch. How I would give this research into how I tell my grandmother. So, would people be interested in seeing that? Sure. Okay, great. Yeah, because it's really hard, right? It's easy to say, okay, just put your research, talk to your grandmother. That's so easy. It's very difficult. And this title we would change like 20 times, and this one about 15 times. And so, and here you have Professor George Whitesides. He's at Harvard University, the most cited scientist in the world. And I was working with his postdoc, and he had this research, but he couldn't finalize and put the story together. And then he presented it to his lab group, but it was really hard. And he says, well, can you help me put this into a story? And I was like, sure. And so we spent 4 hours at Starbucks right here in Harvard Square. And I thought that this is the first time that research wouldn't fit the method. It wouldn't fit the storytelling method. After doing it for like a year and a half at this point, I said, okay, I finally hit the wall. And so then this is what we ended up with. So can anyone find the protagonist here? It doesn't matter if you're a scientist or not. Magnetic levitation, yes. And this is the first time where I was able to put a process into a protagonist. And because I used to think of just one thing, but then now we could put a whole process into a protagonist. We could put a software program into a protagonist to see what it does. And then, or a mathematical model, we can put that into a protagonist now. And then the protagonist, what about the resolution? Separate. This is the infinitive form. George didn't want to, Whitesides didn't like the separates. But that's fine, it's a matter of taste. So using magnetic levitation to a protagonist, resolution, conflict is what? Yes, mixtures. Mixtures and the antagonists are what? Crystal polymorphs. And this is a huge problem in pharmaceutical companies. They make these drugs and they have these crystal polymorphs. You can't separate them. But now you can separate using magnetic levitation on an apparatus that can be just put together very cheaply, if I think about $50 inside of a lab. And so here, this paper was published in Agavante Chemie, the #1 cited journal in chemistry. And so we have protagonist-antagonist conflict. And do we have a scene here? Yeah, we don't really have a scene here. And what's at stake is just separating the crystal polymorphs. So that's kind of loose. So this is where we went to more efficiency, and we didn't want to put our scene here because they wanted to use have pharmaceutical companies, if they wanted to upscale large batches, they didn't want to limit them. And the scene depends on what your needs are. So they left it at that. And so we discussed all through this. So at times you would have all 6 elements. I would try to get all 6, and sometimes we would bring it down to 4, but we'll try to do as many as we can. Yes.
Wouldn't it be better if you, instead of removing the drugs, like that I'm saying about the drugs and other things, because it's like a way of catching the people that are interested in the drugs, but also for the rest. So it's like, you know, like the impact could be bigger than if you just remove a part.
Like
remove the scene. Like, I mean, like,
yeah, it's like saying, because here we don't have a scene.
Yeah, because I mean,
so you
if I read that, maybe I don't have idea where could I apply that. And I know that drugs is one of the scenarios.
Right.
Then there can be more, but at least to put one and add like this and other things.
That's absolutely true. And all these titles that we see, in every paper that I've ever published, they could always be perfected. They could always be better. So you bring up a good point. And at some point, you have to make a decision what you're going to go with. And sometimes the deadline, and you need the paper so you can get tenure, you need to submit it, and your graduate student is graduating, whatever it is, or you have a deadline at work, you need to put your project proposal in. And so you have to just decide. And whatever, I think it becomes individualistic, and it's what you decide and what you decide. But what's nice about this is that you end up deciding, you take the control of your own work, and you present it the way you want to present it. And so at the end, I give suggestions, but people actually end up doing it the way they like. And the only difference that we came up with, they just switched it to the definitive form, and that's fine too. But yes, it could actually written it differently. So if you draft your storyline, you save invaluable time, and hypothesis and storyline prevents draft from becoming headless monsters. So a lot of times people say, fix my manuscript, and they don't have the title or the summary, or the hypothesis, and then it's hard for me to fix because then we have to redo the whole manuscript. So it's always good, I recommend to start with the hypothesis and the storyline and the summary, and then you go from there. You bend it into, you have the storyline serves as an outline for your draft, you bend it into a dramatic arc, and as a logical staircase brings reader to enlightenment. And so now, dilating the Simba hypothesis. So now we have Simba, and so the hypothesis, Simba defeats Scar to take his rightful place as the king of the private lands of Africa and continues the circle of life. That's our hypothesis. And then T1, when he gets kicked out, then who are the first characters he meets? Timon and Pumbaa, yes. And what do they tell him? Kuma Matata, no big deal. So do they support the hypothesis?
No.
They don't support the hypothesis, right? Kind of like in the real world. Sometimes you set a goal and you want to do something, and actually it's, not what you expect, right? So they don't support the hypothesis. And then in the movie, who is the next character that he met? Do people remember? Nala, yes, Nala. Yeah, so he meets Nala, it's his girlfriend. And so it becomes his girlfriend. And what does she tell him? Did she say Hakuna Matata?
No.
There's no Hakuna Matata. What did she say? Does she support the hypothesis? Or does she? Yeah.
She said grow up.
She said grow up. And what does she tell him that he needs to do?
Go back.
He needs to go back, right? And so her interaction supports the hypothesis. And so she's got to be a scientist. So we have a female scientist, Nala, telling somebody needs to go back. So I have my protein EI5 binds to EIF1, and EI5 binds to EF2 beta. I didn't know which one was more important. They're contradictory. And so whether you're at work, working on a software or a program, and things aren't working, you don't just abort everything, just try it again. So we do a different experiment, So who was the third character? Who was the next character in the story that Rafiki, the monkey, right? And then what happens there when he shows him his father and everything happens? What does the father say? What's that? Take his rightful place as king, and you need to go back, right? So you have two evidence for and one against. So my protein EI5 binds to EF1, then EF2 beta. I don't know which one's more important, but I put them all together. We shot small angle X-ray scattering, added X-rays, and then we could see that it was only the EI5 and EF2 beta was more important. So then, my protein, then we learned that Nala was more important as opposed to, yes.
I have to disagree with you. I think Puma and Timon are in the story to support the hypothesis. I think you're taking literally the message that they convey, that is like have fun and don't care, but what they're doing is they're providing the support that he needed when he was alone, and without them he would have never made it. So they're in the story for a very good reason, and they are supporting the hypothesis.
Absolutely, they're essential to the story. I do agree with that. They're essential to the story. Now, how does everyone else feel about that? You agree? Who else? Anyone? And so, so when you say, yes, they're essential to the story, but they can still be against the hypothesis and still be essential to the story. It's not like it's if and or other, but the way that you set the problem, they just actually. So what's happening here is character development of Simba, which is very important. So they lay the groundwork for the character development. Yes, that's true. But they tell him this message. We can only go off the evidence from the words out of their mouth. And they say, Akuma Matata, and they say, there's no worries, they're singing along. So we have a lot of evidence. So if we just look at the evidence, then you can decide whether it's for or against. But if we look at the evidence from what they say, and if you're writing a story, whether you're a humanist or you're putting something together, you want to be based off of what you put down there. And so if you're writing a scientific manuscript, you're writing an algorithm, whatever it does, people are going to evaluate the evidence that you put into that story. And yes, it could be interpreted different types of ways, but you really want to have it so you can have it interpreted a certain way. But yes, they're essential to character development. I do agree with that. But as far as the hypothesis, the Simba defeats Scar to take his rightful place as king in the pride lands of Africa and continue the circle of life. It's harder to see how they're really pushing him to get there, where Nala actually pushes him, and he was conflicted at the time. So, but yeah, we can talk about this more afterwards. Yeah, but I love this story though. So so we can talk about this more. But because it's complicated. It's complicated. And so he sees Rafiki trying to go back, and then now, what's the final battle is what? Climax with who? Scar, right? Simba and Scar. And now our hypothesis was Simba defeats Scar to take his rightful place as king, pride lands of Africa, and continue circle of life. So that's done. So you notice in our title, we don't mention Rafiki, Nala, Timon, and Pumbaa. We don't mention that, but we do mention Scar. And validation. This is so important when you're doing your story. How is it validated? And what's the way you cross-check your methods? And at the end is the hypothesis resolved. So validation, all the animals come back, they go back to Prairie Rock. And at the end, now my daughter is in 6th grade, and we love movies. And then what happens if we watch the movie? We watch this many times, Lion. But what happens if we watch this movie and right after Simba defeats Scar, we press stop? Okay, let's go do our homework. What do you think my daughter would tell me? And she's very vocal and strong, young girl. What would she tell me? Yeah, there's a no-win situation for me there. She was like, no, we're gonna watch the movie and then I'll do my homework. That's what she would say, right? And so, but what is it so important why does she want to see the rest of it? Because Simba defeats Scar, we could just stop it right there. Why don't we just stop right there?
Because you gotta know why it matters.
Why it matters? Okay, yeah. Anyone else? What is it about human nature that we need to get that resolution? What is it?
What's the new state things?
What's that?
What's the new state things? What is the contribution?
Yeah, so what matters, the contribution, the impact. Okay, so then we press play. Okay, so Simba defeats Scar, And then we continue, press play, and she watches the rest. And all you see all the animals back. We could have predicted all of that. We see the animals come back, and then Rafiki raises up Simba at the end. Is that what happens? Do people remember the movie? Rafiki raises Simba at the end. People agree with that, or
Simba's song.
Oh yes, it's progeny. So it's actually his daughter, which you will know in Lion King 2, the Lion's second movie. So the Rafiki is raised up the Lion King 2. And what does that do? So we have Simba the Free Scar to take his rightful place as King of Africa, and continues the what? Circle of life. So we needed that end, right? And so when you ask the question about can we do word efficiency? Yes, we could do word efficiency. But sometimes you might miss out a little bit. There's pros and cons to everything, and there's no perfect way of doing anything. Whatever you want to publish, there's nothing that's going to be perfect. I haven't read, I work with hundreds of manuscripts. I haven't found one that's either published that's 100% correct or that's in draft is correct. It's just never going to be perfect. And we submit. I don't even like reading my own manuscripts afterwards. Let's find all kinds of mistakes. And I could have said this differently. So, but at the same time, you still have to put your next foot forward and really do the best you can. And so we have the hypothesis resolved. So structure is the basis of storytelling, and evidence serves as a spine. So whatever you do, you really should provide the evidence, and need to be tied into a story. So we mentioned the beginning and the end. The beginning is your problem, results. The middle is your end. The middle has the results and evidence, and the end is the resolution. So you really want to start, if you're doing a dissertation, you start at the beginning, very broad, go very specific, do the results, and then you go back to the beginning. So you start with a 20,000-foot view, and you zoom into ground level, and then you take back off and go back to a 20,000-foot view. And then you narrow the story back up. And all your hypotheses should be written in full sentences. And so what is the speaker and writer part, audience part? And so we talk about, so if you have the speaker and you have the audience, or if you're writing a writer and the reader. So if I could get right here, please, on this whiteboard, just want to, just for a second. So if we have the speaker, or if you're a writer, and you have the audience, and you have the reader. So when you're writing a manuscript or you're preparing to talk, right? How much work does the audience do? So if you're giving a talk, how much are they supposed to do, like follow along logically? Do you give them everything? If you start off at 0, you give them everything to 100%, or is the audience supposed to go from 0 all the way to 100? So what's this? This is dynamic. So whenever you are actually writing a manuscript, giving a talk, there's actually a dynamic. So if you really want to be effective at teaching or communicating, we're done then. Thanks for giving the space. So there's actually a dynamic between the speaker now and the audience. There's a dynamic happening. And there's some work that's required of you, some work required of me. Every time you go to the talk, every time you read a book, there's some work that the reader needs to do and some work that the writer needs to put there for the reader. So in this loosely based metaphor, what would we say? Is it how much does the speaker do? How much does the audience do? The writer or the reader? So when you write, how many people write manuscripts? Oh, great. Okay. So when you write your manuscript, how much do you let the reader jump to any conclusions, or do you put all the data? How do you know to get that right balance? What to put in, what not to put in? Because there's a word limit for all manuscripts. Well, at least in science, you can't just put your dissertation into a manuscript. There's word limit. So how do you know what goes in and what doesn't go in?
Has to be convincing.
Has to be convincing, right? So typically what I normally recommend is, I would always think, whenever I'm giving a talk, I always think that audience should meet me halfway, 50%, if I really want them to learn. So if I'm talking to my daughter and all I'm doing is doing all the talking, she's not asking me any questions, then I always think that maybe she's not really listening to me, right? But if we're communicating back and forth, even if it's something that where someone may not agree with me, that's great because at least they're listening. So I'm kind of happy about this, right? And so so whenever you give a talk or whenever you write a manuscript, you can't fit everything in there. And you would demonstrate, if we take Lion King, for example, did they mention how history, like evolution, and how all animals got to Africa? Did they mention the history of Africa? What about the zebra? There were zebras there. We don't know anything about the zebras, the elephants. We don't know anything about all the other animals. The story is very focused. All that part was left out. And really, it was just from the focus of Simba. So I always try to recommend, whenever you're writing, always try to be, I'm very conscious how much work I'm doing as a speaker or as a writer, and I think the onus should be shared in order to really learn. And so you never want a data dump or too much evidence, because we have that in academia and professional work a lot, but you really want them to remember you. They won't remember all the data, but if it's fashioned, it's very memorable. And the audience will remember the story. And so we have some time. So now, I promised you guys that I'll share my elevator pitch. So since we go to the model of 50%, we're passing out where you can write your own hypothesis, and then afterwards I'll show you how I do my elevator pitch. So you just put your protagonist, antagonist, conflict, scene, resolution, and come up with a hypothesis of your work. And the more complicated your work is, the better, because then you just start really trying to get it done. And I'll pull up my YouTube video. But he's beautiful. Hopefully changed. He's not saying anything. So now, who would like to hear my elevator pitch? Okay. So we'll spend like a few minutes to write your scientific storytelling hypothesis, which will dilate into an elevator pitch. And in order to help you, I have, first of all, you can just write this as best you can. We'll take like 2 or 3 minutes. Nothing, you study long, you study wrong. And we can move things quickly, and then we'll write quickly into an elevator pitch, and then we're done for the day. And here I have the elevator pitch of what I just gave here, the text. And it gets really simple. Like when I gave this at MIT a couple weeks ago, the students, they were able to do the elevator pitches very quickly. So we'll give you about 2 more minutes. Think of yourself or what you work with as a protagonist, antagonist, conflict. And it's not so easy either. Like I've worked with people for hours and days and weeks. I struggle when I write my own as well. Question. If something's really complicated, how do you really take that and put it into a digestible form? I'll pass out how I did it. Okay, 45 seconds. appreciate this. 10 seconds. Alright. So we'll play this video and then you can get back to it in a little bit. And hopefully it'll help you craft yours. So, all right, here it is. Okay, let me get some Did everyone fill in their elevator pitch? Did everyone get a chance to hear it? Okay. So my grandma asked me, let's see how I want to use. So my grandma asked me, hey sweetie, so what is it that you do? All right. So I've been trying to practice and it is hard, okay? I think I've tried like 60, 70 times. It is hard, okay? But hopefully, maybe some of my anxiety, some of my football may be able to help you, or you may be able to see how we took the same story, right? Yeah, I had 5, 1, and 2 beta. But now I'm switching to the elevator pitch. All right, can you time this? Just 2 seconds. Because I'm going to go through exactly what you're going to go through in a few minutes. So, all right. So go ahead and ask me the question. Oh, sorry. So messed up. I study cancer, and cancer is nothing but uncontrollable cell growth. So in order for cells to grow, they need building blocks. And these building blocks are proteins, which are the bricks of the cell. So in the belly of every single cell, there's a brick-making factory with assembly lines. And at the end of the assembly lines, there's a chief directing 2 factory workers. They can make more proteins, or more bricks, or less bricks. So what we want to do is instruct this chief to make less proteins in order to slow down protein synthesis and tumor progression, and also as a treatment for cancer. 45 seconds? Jesus. Okay, so that was my elevator pitch. I used to do it all the time in real time, but it would change based off how nervous I was, and I just started playing the video. It's just easier for me. I also get shy. So now I'm passing out this right here. Now, was anyone able to finish a hypothesis? No, right? It's not so easy, right? Right. Here's quickly a template for the an elevator pitch. And here's my text. So what we normally find is that if you just kind of like take something similar in the metaphor, it's easier to like fill out a pitch. And then we can do this in 4 minutes, and then anyone else that would like to volunteer the elevator pitch is great. It's not as easy as you think, especially when you have a template. But yes, like the question you asked, how do you explain it to my daughter? That's how I explain it to her.
You great animation.
Oh, animation, yes.
That story, what you told, I was picturing it as an animation.
Yes, that's good. That's good. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I really want you to leave here with looking at this differently and being able to do your work with this. And feel free to use my text as a template. The text of my elevator pitch. Just kind of plug and chug. Study long, you study long. and make it as fun as possible. It should be fun. Like you're talking to your grandma or your daughter or son. More fun, the better. And you're writing this for you. You don't have to share it later with others. You can just keep it for yourself. If you want to share it, that's fine, but it's really for you. If you have any questions, you can just ask. Two more minutes and then we'll wrap things up. And it's just your best effort. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, even if you had 3 years. So one more minute, then we'll wrap up. Okay, 10 more seconds and then we'll just wrap things up. And make sure you have enough time for your refreshments. It's so important. I've been drinking water, had coffee here, but I feel bad for you guys. All right. So now, was anyone able to finish? Sometimes it's not so easy. Now, were you able to fill in all the sections at all? Anyone? One person did? Oh, do you want to share?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Let's see how he does. Oh, wait a second. Let me just get the time. Okay, go.
So I make computer programs to help doctors to see evil things in medical images from our bodies. Sometimes they don't have enough time, or the stuff that they have to see is too small. So my program search for evil little guys that can harm us, that are inside our bodies. when they see that something is wrong, my program sounds the alarm so that the doctor can fight the evil guys if they are really there. And doctors say they work better and happier when they have this help. So if doctors work better, they can heal more people.
Wow, that's pretty good. Give them a round of applause. 35 seconds. That was really good.
Second floor.
35 seconds. That's great. That's a great elevator pitch. It was better than mine in 45 seconds. Anyone else? Did anyone else finish or get close to finishing? Okay. Well, yeah, that's thank you for sharing. And you can take this and keep working on that. My YouTube video is online, just Luna Scientific Storytelling, and you also have the text. So, but whenever you're going, if you really don't have, sometimes in an elevator you might have like 7 seconds, and you might be able to stretch it to 30 seconds to a minute. You really don't have sometimes 2 minutes. I used to give workshops on 2-minute elevator pitches, but in reality, I don't really think you have that much time. And then it's, you really have to be efficient. So when it matters the most, you really want to tell a logical story. You don't always have to tell a story, but if it's really important, I always fashion it into a story. And we have a little green monster with the head on. And now we work in a global workforce, and you really should tell your story because you're experiencing so many wonderful things. A lot of you here from Spain, and you're really building up a wonderful story of your global professional training, and you can take that back to Spain, or you can just establish yourself here and just move on from here, whatever you want to do. But really, it's all about telling your own narrative, and you fashion your own narrative the way you want to do it. So I'd like to thank Ikusa Boston, Christina, Javier, and Marta for bringing me here. It's really great. I always say yes to Christina whenever she asks me to do anything because she's always doing really cool things. And I have to give credit. My gift is not in art, so I have to give credit to Dr. Lee. She actually drew all the paintings and all the figures for that. It's yeah, that's not my gift. And thank you very much for your time. And if you ever want to get in contact with me, you can either do it through LinkedIn, Luna Scientific Storytelling, or my email is lunastorytelling@gmail.com. I don't mind working with people and go to coffee shops and we'll play with their stories and come up to something. Or if you want to disagree with me, we can go to the coffee shop and we'll talk about it for hours. And you can convince me. I try to be open, but I like to see the evidence. So, and thank you, and that's it. And hopefully you can enjoy all the refreshments. I'll be around for any questions. So, yes.